We'll get started. I want to kind of first welcome everyone. Today is Tuesday. You know, Tuesdays are very funny. I don't know how Tuesdays are for you. Tuesdays it tend to be my busiest day of the week. I don't know why, but that's just the way it's worked out for me. So I know it's very busy for most of the people here, if not everybody. So I'm glad that you took your time out to come and do this with us. This is a 1 hour session. We're not going to go over. We want to give people their time back. I know Tanya has been really, kind of looking at ways to optimize the timing for everyone so that we can definitely have more effectiveness as opposed to efficiency in the way we do things. So welcome everyone, and good to see you, those that are on camera or those that are not on camera. Today we have a speaker, someone that I really am very glad to have met. We only met recently in the last year, but it's been as if we've met or been doing this together for a while. And it was just the same way I feel about Tanya. Happens to be Kenyan, so I don't know if that is the thing. I don't know if the Kenyan DNA is the thing. We'll figure that out. I'm not going to give the Kenyans that yet. So let's just not do that as of this moment. But Margaret is a product leader that we happened to come across in Kenya last year, and she's been part of my circle ever since. She's somebody that I respect as a product person. I know she is one of the folks in Nairobi and on the continent that is really driving a lot of product thinking, product community, and just really great product management work. So, when Tanya was like, can we close out the week with somebody who's doing this, right? Who's doing the work and who's able to articulate how the product management function, especially for startups, right? Especially for startups, but also think about the competition that you have out there. Some of the bigger companies that have deeper benches of product people, how do they make sure that they are focused on, let's say, the problem, right? They're not solutionizing, they are focused on the problem and then addressing the problem by coming up with products that do that. So Margaret is definitely someone that I respect and that I'm glad that is joining us today. She will do an intro, and what the way today is going to work out is she will do kind of a 10 to 15 minute kind of intro, just kind of talk about her journey in fintech and product. And then, provide, we'll have a conversation around some of the key things that she has gone through, in terms of user-centric innovation, in terms of continuous discovery and delivery, right? I've been talking about that a lot. And then also just teams, right? So many of you, at some point, you're going to have to hire your product person if you haven't already. If you're not the product person already, you're going to have to hire product people. What kind of expertise are you trying to bring into your organization? There's this concept that I really love, and I'm glad she will talk about it a little bit, which is, this concept of mercenaries versus missionaries. In Nigeria, this is a major problem where most of our young people are being kind of mercenary oriented. Just pay me, and if you're going to pay me $2,000 more than my old job, I'll come to you. And that is causing a lot of product misalignment.
The person that allows you to care of you. If there's a deal breaker in this relationship, like it.
Director Wick is in the middle of serious negotiations, as you can hear. She's like, this is a deal breaker. So anyways, we'll let her do what she's doing. So anyways, Margaret, let me hand it over to you. Please go ahead. I don't know if you wanted to share your screen or if you wanted to do anything, but I'll hand it over to you. Just let me know how I can support you on this.
I think, Chidi, you can share on my behalf.
Okay, so do you want the deck? Which one? What do you want?
Yeah, the deck.
Okay, all right, hold on. Let me find it. And we are coming. Give me a second. Okay. Hold on, Margaret. Let me just align this properly. Not clashing. Is that it? That's the right one?
That's the right one.
Okay. All right. Okay, take it away.
All right. Thank you, everyone. If you can still turn on your camera, I think it's good. If we cannot network in person, this is the opportunity for us to network. Tomorrow you might meet me on your way somewhere and you would want a favor from me. So I need to know if I'll be speaking to the right person. Anyway.
That was not a blunt force pitch right there, Margaret. No, just keep going. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I think following the structure that Chidi has mentioned, I'm going to give you just a brief career journey, and that career journey will inform later on the key aspects that we are going to speak to. So I started off my career as a software engineer around 10 years ago. So I did that for 4 years. I started off at Mahindra Comviva, which provides the mobile money platform for Airtel across Africa and other telcos as well. So after Comviva, I then moved to Inmobia Technologies, still doing software engineering. And that's the point where I then transitioned to product management. By then, product management wasn't as fancy as it is right now. It was a mixture of several things, people calling it different names. Some of us were not clear if we were program managers or project managers or product managers or business analysts. And I'm sure for startups, you're still in a place where you're trying to figure like, who do I hire for my business? In the end, we'll see all that. The title doesn't matter. It's whether somebody is good at their domain or good at their craft. So after Inmobia, I went back to payments, which I was based at DPO Group. It has now been acquired by Network International. So at BPO Group, it's where I made the switch from software engineering to product management. So like I said, I did not know it was product management, but some of my critical skills were superseding the ones for software engineering. I was very empathetic when it came to customers. If my customer was an Uber driver, on my way home, I would be interviewing the Uber driver without necessarily knowing. And then just the ability to think strategically, to fall in love with a problem. That's how I ended up transitioning into product management. So I kickstarted my career as a product manager as a DPO Group, looking at their mobile payments portfolio, grew that to a point where they have now been acquired by Network International. I then got bored of working for a startup and tried working for a bank. And so I moved to Equity Bank, where I was working for their fintech-led startup. I'm emphasizing on their fintech-led startup or subsidiary because throughout the conversation, we are going to see the dynamics of the corporates versus you as a startup. So at FinServe, I was a product manager for their open banking solution, which has been used by several remittance companies, as well as their payments solution. And then thereafter, I moved to Pitch Payments, so still in the payments industry. So where I'm currently a director of product. And beyond work, which is my 9 to 5, I am passionate about innovation and driving that through learning institution, driving that to community and startup ecosystem. And that's where Chidi and I think closely collaborate in one of the initiatives. So as I'm speaking, you can tell there is Margaret that is very good when it comes to payments and fintech. And there is Margaret that is very good when it comes to product. She's also a certified product manager by Association of International Product Marketing and Management. So throughout my career, I've been able to work for startups and also for corporates like banks. And so all of those have various dynamics of operations. For startups, you are founder-led. So Chidi, you can move to the next slide. For startups, you are founder-led. And what I would say, what do I mean when I say you are founder-led is that you probably came up with this nice idea around insurance or insurtech, and then you want now to make that into what you call your startup. So you are the one who is responsible for all your visions and everything, and a lot of ideas and things that are implemented by your team are actually driven by you as a founder or by your co-founders, right? And the gap of that and how you would navigate this is, yes, you have this idea, but it doesn't stop there. You need to go and validate if it's actually a problem in the market. So by that I'm saying is we need to focus on the problem and not on the solution. Most of us, we usually start with solutions. I have or technology for now. There's a lot of buzzwords going on around AI, around blockchain. But the truth is, customers do not care if you're using blockchain or if you're using AI. What customers care about is, are you solving for their pain points? Do you understand their needs, right? But the main mistake that we usually do is we have all these assumptions about problems that exist. And then we probably already have a solution. We have vendors in mind, somebody who is going to build for you this, or somebody who has a platform that does this. And then we try and force problems into those solutions. So how I have done it differently is I focus on the problem. And the problem in this case is, what is my user's pain points? Yeah. What is it that I want to solve for that at the end of the day, they can actually buy? It could be convenience. It could be a cheaper way of doing something, right? But it has to address a particular pain point. And that will then force you to think about who is your customer. What segment does this particular customer fall in? So it's very critical for you when you're running your startup is to differentiate what you have in mind, all the assumptions that you have in mind, and validate that by actually understanding the pain points of your users. And then, like I've mentioned, create products that solve real problems. That is what customers buy, a solution to their problem. They do not buy fancy. They might give you the impression that they're buying fancy, but they're actually buying a solution to your problem. Having worked for several startups, I've seen, let's say, a variation on how we deliver a product to the market. You'll have one product that is very fancy and you've spent all your AI and blockchain resources, you've hired the best engineers. But if they were not built with a particular problem or customer pain point in mind, and then built from a customer's perspective, then even if you push that product to the market, regardless of how good your technology is, your customers will not care. Even if you put fancy things on your product, if all they needed was convenience, that's what they will care about. So in relation to the 3 Ps, which is the product and the process and the people, this one covers the aspect of the product, and for our case is the problem. So we must fall in love with the problem and not fall in love with the solution, which is the mistake that most of us do. Actually, you can move to the next slide.
Margaret, before you continue, and if you don't mind, I'll chime in every now and then, right? But could you speak? Let me just go back to this question of focusing on the problem and the fact that technology is not the solution, right?
Yeah.
Because part of raising money, part of distinguishing yourself from the competition usually is in the sound bites that is shared in the media or is shared in the boardroom, which is, oh, we use AI to blah, blah, blah. We're a blockchain infused Web3 crypto startup that does insurance in the ecosphere outside of the planet, and so on and so forth. Many founders see the value in that. They think that it make them sound more exciting. What do you see any benefit to that? Or is there a balance that they have to strike to make sure that maybe when they're explaining the stuff, you come at it from the customer's perspective as opposed to the technology, the enabling technologies perspective?
Well, it depends with who you are attracting, and that's why possibly you need to balance the narrative. There's a narrative that you can sell to the investors and it will work. And that's where a lot of technology jargons will come into that. But then you can sell that same narrative to your potential customers, but will that keep them? The answer is no, because what will keep them is the solution to their pain points. It's not the technology. So you might be able to capture them in the beginning, but you'll not be able to keep them. And that's why you see in the beginning, a lot of, because we are selling this technology and stuff, you see the adoption increasing very high. But with time, you find that those startups end up not performing very well because the person who is keeping your business running day to day, it transitions from being the investor who pumped in the money, and now you need to sustain the business. And the person who will help you sustain that business is your customer. And so this particular person who cares about their pain points and less about your technology, your infrastructure. So there needs to be a balance, and also it's very specific to who you are selling the narrative to, and also at what point of the business.
Okay. All right, cool. Thank you. All right.
Yeah. So the next aspect, and I'm sure Chidi has spoken to you on this, is continuous discovery and delivery. One of the biggest mistakes that we make is we tend to ship and forget. By ship and forget is we build this powerful product and then we release it at once to the market, and then we forget about it. But I'm not saying that we do not track its success. I'm saying that we forget about it. We assume that that's enough for the customers. So we do not go back to our customers to collect the feedback and understand. We do not evolve our product with the evolving users' needs. And you'll be shocked that most of your users, they do not know what they want, right? It's until you present them something that it actually prompts them to want more. So you need to be able to constantly evolve your product. You need to constantly go back and learn from your product. And discovery is not a one-time thing, right? It's a continuous process. And I'm sure when you're speaking about continuous, most of us, especially when we get to delivery, we will be trapped to the agile mindset, the agile way of working, as we commonly say, But you'll find that deep inside, what we do in most of our organizations is not agile. Most of us are still in the waterfall method, where the customer only sees the product when it's complete. And by complete, it's for you, it's fully functional. But for us, adopting a proper agile mindset and not tied to the frameworks that we are used to, especially when it comes to delivery, it means that we are constantly going back to our users and getting feedback and making changes on that, constantly identifying problems and making improvements on that, which then leads me to the aspect of incorporating product design. And this also informs to probably how you handle the delivery aspect. So you have your products managers who probably are good in understanding the requirements.
Go ahead, I got you.
Who are good in understanding the problem from a user's perspective, but then you also need to incorporate product design, which basically looks at the end-to-end process. You're talking about your user research, you're talking about ideation, you're talking about prototyping. And why this is important, because it is through this process of ideation that you're going to identify your product needs in depth beyond aesthetics. I think most of the time when we speak about design, we sort of assume it's just the look and feel, but it's designing with the user in mind. And then another benefit that comes with that is you want to differentiate your product against your competitors. So when you build your product with the users in mind, then you're able to identify all their pain points and all their needs that you can actually solve for. And I can never insist more than enhanced user experience. There are instances where I've bought products or I've used apps and I've dropped using them because of something very simple. And having been in fintech for quite some time, I understand that your customers can actually drop, or your users can actually drop because of a very simple inconvenience. And then definitely from an implementation perspective, if you're following the actual product design process, then it means you're prototyping and getting feedback. And that whole loop reduces your time to market as a startup. Because I'm sure as a startup, you are looking at getting into the market very fast, right? So product design will help you get to the market fast. Chidi, you can move to the next slide. And then still in the aspect of continuous discovery and delivery, I usually say as a startup, and what I've seen, some of the very good successful startups that I've worked in is that they were willing to take the risk. And by taking the risk, I mean, they were willing to experiment and fail and learn from it. And if I look at the competitive landscape of fintech, we are basically offering the same product. If you look at what Stripe is offering and look at what Paystack and Flutter are offering, the difference is very minimal, unless you get to aspect like pricing. So how you stand out is how fast do you get to the market. And one thing we usually do is you want, like I had mentioned initially, you want to deliver a complete product. And the mistake in that is you're not factoring in the customer's feedback in that, and the improvements that you'll do in that. But when you introduce the aspect of MVP, is you want to get as much feedback as possible from your users, from your customers, and iterate through it early enough before it becomes very expensive. So if you're delivering in iterations, then the mistakes that you make are not as expensive as when you deliver a complete product in the very end with no customer inputs. And so your users or your customers are seeing your product for the first time, and chances of them struggling to adopt your product are very high. But if you are releasing it in iterations and building on your MVPs, you're also keeping your customers excited. And if you look at strategies that some of these big companies use, somebody like Amazon, they'll probably announce that they're releasing a product before they actually release it. And the aim of that is to get us as their customers excited. And so you are sort of preparing the market. So by the time you're launching your market, it's already ripe. But if you wait up to the very end to release a product, you're in a very competitive world. And also that's what sets you apart from large corporates like bank, is that you are able to release things at very short intervals. And then last but not least, it's one thing to identify a problem and solve for it. It's another thing to measure what matters. At any one point, you should be able, as a startup, you should always have your North Star metric. Then you know whatever you are doing, whatever your features, then you're building into your product, you know that you're actually working towards a goal, which is then represented by your North Star metric. Even if your North Star metric is the volumes that you are processing, then you know whatever you are doing must inform to the volumes that you're processing. That way, your North Star metric is kind of guiding you in that whatever you are doing, then it forms to something. And then the importance of also measuring what matters is making data-driven decisions. I'm sure from a product perspective, most of us are trapped with a backlog of features that we want to do. And the mistake that we make is we do not know how to prioritize and how to use the data that we have, especially if it's a combination of insurance and tech, then it means technology will play a key role when it comes to getting those data that you can measure. Are you tracking your customers' behavior? Are you tracking the performance of your products, and so forth? So it's very important to measure what matters and to also learn from it. So from our 3 Ps, we've covered the product, we've covered the process. When it comes to product, and like you said, you could pick, there is Margaret that is the fintech or the payments expert, and there is Margaret that is a craft expert, and my craft is product management. As a startup, you need to hire a mix of the two. So if your startup is InsurTech, ensure that in your team, there's somebody who actually has a deeper understanding of insurance. What has made me stand out in my roles in product, and I've been very intentional with being a product manager in fintech, is I first understand the fintech space. So I understand the players, I understand the competition very well, I understand the trends, and I keep myself appraised of all these things happening in the industry. That makes me stand out as a fintech PM. But on the other hand, I am also a very good product manager. So I understand the whole end-to-end life cycle. I know that I need to validate my assumptions. I know that I need to prioritize whatever I'm working on. So when I get up with the balance of two, then it makes me a very good product manager, especially for startups, because you want people who are thinking on the go. You might not find people like Margaret who are a mixture of having core strengths in terms of domain and in terms of the craft. So in your teams, just make sure if you cannot find somebody who has a balance of experience when it comes to product and insurance or design and insurance, ensure that at least for the individual people that you're hiring, they fit either of the two. And then my favorite aspect is the missionaries versus the mercenaries. So missionaries, this is somebody like a Margaret can be a missionary. She's very excited about the industry, and you'll see such a person thriving when she sees her products are successful. So this kind of person, you'll see them obsessed, especially when it comes to measuring success. You'll see them obsessed in that. But then you have the mercenaries. For them, they just ship and move on. So as a startup, I would encourage you to lean towards getting missionaries, but at the same time, you need to strike a balance between a missionary and a mercenary, because missionaries, they tend to be so much excited and are passionate and they're deep into the problem. Once in a while, they need somebody who will get them back to reality and also ensure that you execute and deliver on time. So it's more of a balance of both. But looking at my experience and my contribution, I've been able to deliver fast because I was a missionary. And I've also worked with mercenaries, and I have seen, in as much as from the look of it, we tend to have pros when it comes to missionaries, but mercenaries also play a key role. But ensure that your team has, I would give it a percentage of 80% missionaries. And then you have the realists, who are the mercenaries, who are will always make you to stop dreaming, because there's also a risk in being caught in your dream and you do not see that you need to actually execute. So strike a balance, but always make sure that your team has a lot of missionaries. These are people who share in your passion, who share in your dreams, and would do anything to see that is a success. I think even from a recruiting perspective, it will be very easy to identify people who just want to get things done and people who are passionate about whatever they are doing. So I think that then covers my last P, which is people.
Cool. All right. So thank you, Margaret. I think, clearly she kind of goes through the people process and product piece in terms of delivering on her path to where she's been. So we'll open it up for questions. I'm going to actually stop here and I'll start with the questions, because one of the things I want to do is to make sure that for the folks who are listening, Margaret, that they get that there's an understanding of how product management has kind of advanced the fintech world, right, in Africa. Fintech is, I would say, probably the most prolific product ecosystem on the continent. It just is. It just seems like, the big unicorns are in that world, from Cellulant to Flutterwave, Paystack, that got bought by Stripe, and so on and so forth. So the question I'm asking is, why is it that those are the environments that have really done well with product management in terms of bringing the product mindset into the way they build products as opposed to other environments?
I would say, number one, those particular environments being competitive, then it creates the need for you to differentiate how you do things, and the need for you to differentiate how you deliver your products to the market. So then that necessitates the needs of product management, because these are people who fall in love with the problem. These are people who are willing to interact with the users and understand them. I'm sure you've seen a number of those, the unicorns. They organize a lot of meetups for their developer ecosystem. And they do this because they want to get close to their customers and their users. So that competitiveness in itself then demands for a different way of thinking, away from your usual project management, where we just do things so that we can move them across the bridge, to a point where now we bring in the product management, where we can actually quantify our impact. And then number two, also your startups, especially your fintech startups, they're very easy to adapt when it comes to change, which is something that corporates are struggling with. If you look at product management in corporates, it's very different, because number one, before you do something, you'll need 1,000,001 sign-offs before you actually go ahead with your idea. But then if you look at the startup world, as long as you can motivate why, as long as you can actually elevate your quantifiable impact, then it's very easy to also practice product management. Because it's one thing to be a product manager, it's another thing to be in an environment that allows you to practice that product management. So looking at the competitiveness, looking at those industries and their abilities, those sectors and their abilities to adapt to change, ability to embrace new technologies, ability to embrace news of working, then you see them now embracing the aspect of product management when it comes to building their product. And you'll see now, I think you'll see somebody like Nala, who is now, I think Nala started a few years ago, and other companies like World Remit, your Thunes, they have been there for long. But after this, or if you're on a phone, just go and look at how Nala engages its users. And they have been able to grow significantly within a short time. You'd see them coming on Twitter and saying, we are piloting a product in the UK to send money to Tanzania. If you are in the UK and you're willing to be part of this pilot, then we are going to incentivize you. That one has driven Nala to great heights, because their products are built with their customers in mind. You'll rarely see like a corporate coming to tell you, to ask you for feedback. But if you look at how Nala is approaching their product development, then you will see the importance of product management in it. In fact, for them, they actually have their roadmap out in public. So you can be able to tell, they'll tell you, this is what we are planning to build in the next few months. And I think there's a way you can also give in your input to that roadmap. So you see, because they're building with the customer and the users in mind, then it creates that environment where the product management way of doing things actually thrives. So okay. Check on Nala's Twitter handle, check on the founder.
Could you tell him what's Nala, spell it out, please, I beg.
Nala is just like I'm saying, it's Nala.
In this day and age of startups, just because you're saying it one way doesn't mean that's the way it's spelled out. It could easily be Nalaha, whatever. So
yeah.
Nala. Okay, good. So let me one quick question. I'm sure other people have questions. So if you have a question, please raise your hand. But I have a question about insurtechs, right? Because okay, you've talked about fintech. Insurtech, I will put in that category, but it is one of the most. I mean, you look at the numbers are awful, Like, quite honestly, when you talk about insurance in Africa, that's the reason why Tanya and her team are doing this, because it's like, what does failure look like? Failure, there's no failure, because all you have to do is add 10,000 users and we've succeeded, right? So the question then becomes, does that, the fact that fintech has done so well because they are startups, they are using product management principles, they are nimble, they are focused on the problem they're following, does that translate to insurance? Or is insurance such a big monolith that there's nothing we can do here?
I think, look at, let me just go back to fintech a bit. Look at few years ago, fintech was basically dominated by banks, right? And we knew banks are the only people who could handle our money, who could enable us to transfer money. And that has since changed to a point where now banks are now starting to come up with your fintech subsidiaries like FinServe, which I worked for, to try and also compete with these startups. So we need to ask ourselves, what have the fintech startups done differently? Because the market is there. And then the same thing is with insurance. Right now, we've left insurance for the corporates, right? So there's need, and for me, when I think of insurance, I think about many forms that I have to fill. I think about I having to walk to an insurance office, I having to nudge my agent every now and then. So your users already exist, but there is a huge gap between us as users and the insurance product. And that's why insurtech startups actually stand a chance, because they need to bridge this gap between the insurance users and the insurance itself. So I think there is a huge potential for insurtech. It's huge.
Humongous.
Yes, I don't think we've scratched. Like I've just told you my problem as a user. So you can imagine how many Margarets are out there that need information on various insurance packages. How many Margarets are wondering, can I insure my phone? Can I insure my home? There are so many of us with problems, but you need to engage us. You need to engage us as your customers and move away from the traditional way of thinking that we are going to look for a solution. We are going to look for the insurance companies to provide, to get. So we need to move away from that and look at the gaps that exist. So for me, insurance actually stands, and there's so many similarities between insurance and fintechs. And like I've said, I've worked for big corporates who represents your big insurance companies. And I've worked for startups who saw the gaps in how people were accessing the banking services and solved for that. So for you, you need to identify what are these gaps that exist when people are accessing the insurance services. Why is it that still very few people, especially in Africa, have access to insurance? What are these myths here and there? People assume insurance is for the wealthy. That's already an opportunity for you to solve for. So for me, the market is there. We just need to involve ourselves with the market. We cannot solve for it in our offices behind our large screens. We need to get to the ground and actually speak to people. And there are so many segments when it comes to insurance.
Yeah.
Right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Keep
going.
Like
I'm saying there are so many segments. I could go on and on about where to focus in. And like I said, with my product management hat, I can switch from industry to industry. And as I speak, you can already see I'm speaking about pain points in the existing insurance industry that actually technology can solve. And that's where your opportunity lies.
Yeah. No, thank you. Gideon, you have a question.
Yeah, good afternoon from Ghana. Margaret, consider your problems solved there. We are implementing technologies to solve them on your behalf or to you.
See, he
So
just did exactly what I told him not to do. He said we're implementing technology solutions. Gideon, what's wrong with you?
No, no, I'm saying I didn't say technology. I mean we are implementing solutions to your problems. That's what I'm trying to mean.
Okay.
Actually,
I thought I heard you say
should-
we're implementing
yeah.
AI and blockchain solutions. I think I
No,
heard
no,
you say.
no. I didn't mention that.
Okay, go ahead,
I didn't
Gideon.
mention that. Okay, so my question is, I want to take you back to product launching or deployment of products. So what would you advise as a product manager, a startup who hasn't launched its business yet, but has identified, let's say, a competitor who is doing similar thing as the startup intends to do? Okay, that is your MVP. But the startup now has other products which can outrun or which can compete with the already launched campaign. What would you advise? Would you advise the startup company to put out all the let's say the solutions to the problems you've identified, or you just deploy them in phases or in depth? I don't know if my question is clear to you.
Yes, it's clear, and it ties back to my beginning of my presentation is which problem are you solving for? And whatever products you want to push to the markets, are they solving for that particular problem? And as much as you're saying your competitor has a similar solution, what is your key differentiator? Then that's what you capitalize on as you're launching your product and solution. So be very clear on what problem you're solving for. And I want you to look at also when products are being launched, look at the main phrases that organizations use when they are pushing products to the market. If your phrase does not address Margaret's problem, then regardless of how many products you're launching, I won't care about your other products. So identify what's your key differentiator, and then ensure that regardless of how many products you are releasing, you are solving for a known and a particular pain point for the users. Then at that point, whether your competitor has a similar product or not, then it doesn't matter. And there are many strategies that you can do when you're doing your initial launch. Once you identify your segment, do you then want to do to test the product first before going big? Do you want to identify your pilot customers? Do you want to incentivize them so that you can actually drive them using your product? And then with time, then your users then grow because you have this particular segment that actually believed in your product. So if you start looking at competition, you'll never launch anything, right? Because like I've said, you're not the only one thinking about the problems in InsurTech, right? There are several other people doing it. But what is your key differentiator? And is your product speaking to that? And are you elevating that to your users that with us, you can actually do X, Y, Z without necessarily saying you can do this while with the other product you can't. So key point is the problem you are solving for, elevate that, and then with your key differentiators.
All right, thank you very much.
I think, oh, okay.
Someone
Chidi? Yeah, Chidi, I see your body language, but I don't think I can hear you, and nobody else can.
Oh, I'm sorry. I am so sorry. Samuel.
There you are.
Samuel.
Yeah.
Samuel, go ahead, and then Shafiwa.
Thank you. And thanks for the whole discussion. Actually, having this conversation for me is really interesting because I feel like you're touching on many different points. My first interaction with product management comes from a long time ago in regards to Google. Google had an employee called Marisa Mayer who went on to become the CEO of Yahoo. And she was the first time they put together a product management sort of like team. But the thing that was interesting for me, and the reason I'm bringing it out because it became a philosophy in terms of how I build my own company. So product management as an organization was that the thing she studied was symbolic systems in Stanford. And symbolic systems had three key pillars. It had philosophy, it had psychology, and it had software. And the essence of it was that philosophy is why we think the way we do. Psychology is how we think, and then software is to codify it. So she's the reason why, for instance, Google has the one single page for search. That was actually driven by her product management sort of like criteria. So for me, product management's always been such an important thing in the sense that from an organizational model, I realized that at times some of the things that keep us from moving forward are that the organization is driven by traditional models rather than built from a product-centric point of view, where the product defines the team, the product defines the people to hire, the product defines the character, the culture, everything comes from the product and not from the traditional norms of we need to have finance and we need to have HR and we need to have all those things. And with that same mindset, it also opened me up to my own thinkings about insurance. I've engaged with insurers a lot, maybe in terms of, training, building products and things like that. And one of the things that really became apparent is that insurers and insurtechs, we don't normally get along. Actually, BimaLab is the one time, it's interesting, it's structured in a way that we engage with regulators, but actually insurtechs and insurers don't necessarily get along. And the reason we don't is because it's an oxymoron. The digitization of insurance, if you think about it, means the death of insurers. Everything we do automates the process. Go to any insurer, you'll see their website, 70 years, legacy, hundreds of employees and things like that. So with that same sort of like mindset, and even if you pull that thread, and I apologize, I know I'm pulling a thread, but even if you pull that thread, in many ways, the role that we are playing, and if you think about it from a product-centric point of view, is that we are not necessarily innovating insurance, because insurance already exists around us. When we talk about penetration, we're talking about penetration of insurance products. Insurance actually exists around us. It means whether you have a job, it's insurance. Whether you have a family, whether you have community, it's insurance. It's all of those things are insurance. But then, and look at banks, they cannibalize insurance. So the essence of it all, when you think of the path we're on, because we're having a conversation on product, is that the output of everything we do, we might end up in this universe where you have health companies that are insurers. Think of Tesla. It has killed out the insurer because it is one path. It is a car that has data, knows how you drive, knows your behavior, knows all of those things, and can give you an insurance policy within the whole ecosystem. So you don't need a third party to insure. And I think the essence of what I'm getting at, and maybe picking from so many elements of what you'd said, but the component for me for product management is heavily around the philosophy of how we think about the problems we are solving, and not the problem itself, but even the space the problem exists in terms of what is insurance in terms of how does it show up in terms of, and then from there, our users and what problems do they have, and then from there, how is the organization set up, and all of those sort of components. So apologies, but I was sort of bundling so many thoughts against what you'd already said and trying to make them into one thing.
Yeah, so Samuel and Margaret, I'm going to move on to the next question, but I need to make sure that we acknowledge what Samuel said. You know, he talked about bundling. My sense is that his product is also bundled, you know, so, you know, forgive him. But, you know, he made some really good points there. But I also think that this is also something that requires us to continue having these conversations with startups like Samuel's and others, right? So, you know, we appreciate you, Samuel, for what you said. I think there's some points of agreement and also some points of disagreement. You know, I actually think that there's some areas where we can flesh that out. So thank you for your comment. Let me move us to Shafiwa. Shafiwa, do you have a question or a comment?
It's a question.
Are you sure? Let me just make sure.
Yeah.
Is it a question I'll turn into a comment? Because you don't have people like, I don't have a question. Go ahead, my brother, go ahead.
Margaret, thanks for the session. I think from my side, just straight to the point, from a product management perspective, when one is looking, especially from a startup aspect, what are some of the features outside of solving the customer's problem have you, in your experience, seen that customers find valuable and makes them wanting to pay more for the product? Product agnostic, so it doesn't really matter.
Just repeat your question again, because you asked the question and answered it. Just
Okay,
repeat it.
so yes, so basically from a product management perspective, what are some of the features that you've seen that as one include them as part of the build and go-to-market strategy have helped in accelerating the adoption of the product first of all, and to allow customers to want to pay for the solution or the product that you are bringing on the table?
Okay, so I think I won't give you a straight answer to that, but then I'll tell you this: there's no one size that fits all, and that's where you need to go and do your discovery. It could be your customers need convenience. It could be your customer needs access to something. So you have to understand you have to understand your customer. You have to understand their needs. You have to understand their pain points. I could tell you that my customers probably they want something cheap. That is one, but it may not apply to your case, right? For your case, it could be your customers want convenience. Like customer Margaret, like we've said, yes, she knows she can get insurance from let's say, Jubilee Insurance in Kenya. But that whole process of getting that insurance, she doesn't even know where to start when it comes to agency. So that could be a problem. So you need, there's no one size that fits all. And that's why I keep insisting that move away from solution and lean towards identifying the actual problem that we want to solve for and why. So until you identify that, regardless of the answer that I might tell you that I've identified in my product management process, then I will not be helping you, because like I've said, my customers are different and I was probably solving for one problem. Like I've said, pricing, usability, ease of access, convenience, all that. But I will not, quote unquote, bundle them to fit your scenarios. So keep engaging your customers, also understand your markets and dynamic. Then there lies your answer.
Cool. Mohammed, you are our last questioner, unless there's somebody else that wants to come after you. Mohammed.
Yes, thank you, Chidi. My question about product managers, recruitment. From your experience, Margaret, do you think that we should look for an insurance background without product management background, or look for the product management background without an insurance background? Because in countries like Egypt, it's hard to find both. It's non-existent, you know, because we are the first insurtech in the country, so there is no title called product manager in insurance companies or other insurance brokerage firms. So if I had to choose one of both, which one should I choose? And what's your experience in that matter?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And then remember, when I started this conversation, I will tell you that at some point the titles don't matter. Like you said, you're probably looking for somebody who's worked for an insurance company. And then on this other side, you're looking at somebody who can empathize with a customer, somebody who can translate things into requirements, somebody who can balance your business goals versus your customer needs. So that's the person that you look for, or you'd want to get somebody who has an engineering background, but is very empathetic when it comes to users and can easily converse with non-technical teams, which is essentially your business team. Those people actually exist. It's just that they exist under different names. Like I'm sure in the organizations you've worked with, they are called business. There are people who are called business analysts. And essentially what they do is they would go sit with your customers, your partners, and then identify those requirements. So the people exist. It's just that they are not called product management. So then the big question is, if we remove the title product management, what exactly are you looking for? And can you find them in other people? Can you find them in engineers who do not want to be engineers for long and they are now transitioning? They want to transition into something that is a bit more customer facing, something that is a bit more business oriented. Can you find it in project managers who, with just a bit of training and coaching here and there, they can then shift their mindset from project to product management? So those people actually exist, but you just need to look away from the title. For instance, how I transitioned from software engineering to product management. I remember during my interview process, my other skills other than engineering were coming out strongly. And that's how I was a good candidate for the product management. Because number one, I understood how to build stuff. So with that in mind, and I was also very passionate about problems about the customer. Those two made a very good combination of product management. So the people exist. If you just look away from the title and identify the core skills that you're looking for, you will find that they exist, just under different titles.
Yeah, I can see your point. Makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret. Thank you, Mohammed, for that. I think, I just wanted to kind of bring us to a close here and thank Margaret for taking the time to speak to us. As you can see, she doesn't lack for any confidence as a product manager, right? In fact, when you start speaking in third person about yourself, that tells you there's significant confidence there. And that's the kind of confidence that Margaret brings to the table. I also want to say that it's important for those of us who are building to be part of the larger, or let me say even the local product communities in your cities, the local regional product communities, they are there. I know that in all the cities in Africa, the major cities in Africa, those product communities are there. Nairobi, Addis, Kigali, Accra, Lagos, Lusaka, Cape Town, wherever you go, they're there. And so part of the conversation that Margaret is introducing here is, as you think about the kinds of people who are going to help you, whether it's mercenaries, and look, in many cases, I find myself as a mercenary, even when I'm coaching, I am a mercenary. I come in and I do the work, but I do it and I execute, right? And you're going to get the best. And then I move on, right? And then mercenary probably is when I'm doing my own work, building my own companies, building my own products, right? There is nothing with bringing those kinds of people on board. And when you go to these product communities, you will find either. And then you want to make sure that you understand which ones fit into your organization at that time of your product life cycle. The other thing is just to, just focus, this thing about the problem. I know that many of you are struggling with it. And we will keep beating that into the system. Focus on the problem, fall in love with the problem, stay in love with the problem. If you've fallen out of love with the problem, if you're cheating on the problem, fall back in love with the problem, come back, right, to the problem. Make sure that you are focused on the problem, because that's where you're going to get some of the best solutions out there. And I think that it is important for me to acknowledge Margaret. Thank you very much for coming. I think this is very, very helpful for our startups and for the BimaLab team. I think this is, these are the kinds of folks that we want to continue to bring back and be part of the BimaLab community, because these guys are building some serious stuff here. We want to see them succeed, and we are demanding that they succeed. So thank you for coming to speak, Margaret.
Thank you so much, Chidi. If you could just give me one moment. I think I'm itching to respond to, is it Samo?
Samo?
Yeah.
Why would you don't need to respond to Samo, because then people here till like 11.
No,
Margaret.
I'm just
Someone's
saying.
like, bring it. All right, go ahead.
I'm just saying, when it comes to InsurTech and innovation in general, it doesn't necessarily mean you're building something new. So it doesn't necessarily mean insurance do not exist. So we now have to introduce another insurance product. Innovation is beyond reinventing wheels, but finding corners, finding different ways of doing things, reusing existing rails to build your own product. And that's why, as an InsurTech, partnerships is very key, because there are so many things you could do by leveraging existing rails, building on top of existing product. So innovation does not mean you need to introduce something that already exists. You could possibly just find different ways of doing something that somebody has not yet thought of.
Cool. Yes, and I actually think that's a conversation that we want to expand on at some point. I don't know how we find a way. I think Samuel's point is one that we all want to kind of keep in mind, that it's not that, okay, I built an insurance product, is that I'm solving a problem, right? Yeah. That is within this ecosystem of what we will call InsurTech, right? So yeah. That is the beauty of being a product-minded type of entrepreneur, is that you don't even have to call yourself an insurance company in order to solve a problem that could be seen as insurance. In fact, sometimes you might even not want to call your product an insurance product. That way the regulators can leave you alone. And then by the time they realize that you're an insurance product, they're like, oh, wait a minute, but then you've already left the building, right? So now they're chasing you, right? And so they have to adapt to you as opposed to shutting you down, right? Yeah. I've seen many companies that have succeeded in doing that. Uber is one of them. Before people even realized that Uber was, they tried to classify the company as a taxi company. It was too late. The users were already in a place where they were like, this is what we use. And so you can't get rid of Uber. And so they had to actually build regulation around Uber, as opposed to Uber now, having to adopt to the old regulation out there. So Samuel, your point is very well taken. And I think my point of disagreement is irrelevant here. I think the point of agreement is where we should focus our energies on. Okay. Thank you all. Thank you. All right, Margaret, thank you. Tanya, thank you very much, everyone. Have a great day. I will see you on Thursday. Yeah. And we'll talk then. So until then, enjoy. Thank you.